And today's guest is someone who built credibility long before he had titles to rely on. George Khalife is a growth strategist, market builder, and connector of people and ideas across borders.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, how am I supposed to differentiate myself? Speaking of personal brand and building a presence, especially at a young age when I'm an associate, I literally just joined the workforce. How am I supposed to do this? And I found myself every time I would send someone an email, say, for example, you're a managing director, the subject line would always be, let's grab coffee. Why don't I build a platform? And keep in mind, 8 years ago, podcasting wasn't even a thing. I mean, if I said the word podcast, people thought I was trying to be Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel, sort of like a talk show host. They didn't understand the concept of podcasting, kind of like it is now. So I created it. I started a very scrappy website. It wasn't anything great, no budget. And I just started reaching out to people cold. And in the beginning, nobody wanted to come on. People were like, I don't want to be the first guest on this weird show hosted by, a junior associate. And it just started building. Fast forward 8 years, I've had almost 200 episodes. It's always, I think, especially for my generation, I think we're too quick to want to produce. We want to execute, we want to move, we want to create something. I think the one lesson I learned, looking back 8 years, I think the best thing I did was just sort of sleep on it a little bit. I paused. I thought about why it is that I even want to create this podcast. And for me, it was, the big thing is I want to create a platform so selfishly I can get connected to the CEOs I want to learn from. You always want to leave people feeling impressive versus making them feel impressed. I really genuinely think that's always the best approach. People want to feel good. They don't care what you say or what you do. It's how you make people feel. That's ultimately what always wins.
Deciphering personal brand, I've broken down into 3 phases. The first phase is knowing yourself, right? The mission, your ambition, and what makes you unique. Phase 2 is activation. Okay, the channels. Do I go digital? Where do I go digital? How the best to present my visibility? I've got credibility where I can build them. Now I'm going to make them visible. Phase 3 is sustainability and monetization. Now, how do I keep it? I need to be consistent and I need to build for the long term. Your generation is not wrong. It's early. My generation is not obsolete. It's deep. And the future really belongs to the leaders who can combine your speed with our scars, your leverage with our judgment, and your visibility with real substance. So I guess that's what it means to truly reimagine you. Welcome to Reimagining You, the podcast where we explore how professionals shape their identity, build credibility, and create impact on their own terms. I'm Dr. Elie Daher, your host, and today's guest is someone who built credibility long before he had titles to rely on. George Khalife is a growth strategist, market builder, and connector of people and ideas across borders. From capital market at the Toronto Stock Exchange to fintech startup to leading market expansion at a global law firm, George's career reflects a deliberate pattern, earning trust early and building relevance intentionally. He's also the host of Let's Grab Coffee, where he spent years having candid conversations with founders and CEOs across industries, learning how credibility, relationships, and clarity compound over time. George represents a generation that didn't wait to be chosen. They built their own seat at the table. George, welcome to Reimagining You.
Thanks so much, Elie. Thank you for having me. It's always special when a fellow podcaster goes on another podcast, is on the other side of the table, and I know you've built such a great platform for your audience. So I really want to say thank you. Thanks for having me on. And also just a quick shout out to a mutual friend of ours who was the person who put us in touch, Nader Ustum. That's part of the serendipity that happens when you build good relationships.
Absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful person. And thank you, Nader. George, we're going to talk a few things. We're going to start with the podcast because that's an interesting thing. How you feel being on a podcast of somebody else. But also, when we got introduced together, I don't know how, people would probably need to guess your age because I'm going to declare my age. I'm 63. Yeah, so I'm
Think so, John.
63-year-old. I'm a baby boomer, and you are a millennial. That's how I figured it out. So we're going to have a bit of compare and contrast discussion here.
I'm excited.
Particularly around the mission of Reimagining You, which is building personal brand. Our audience and viewers are people your age or senior people that are in a comfort zone or probably a work or a job, and call it the comfort trap. And they have an ambition, they have a mission, or they have a desire to really go out and explore and build their own thing or chase their own dreams. So we're trying to guide them and inspire them on how stories like yours could help build their personal brand, get out, get visibility, not only credibility, but put their credibility out and gain visibility and build whatever they ambition and desire to be to build. So that's a long winding introduction, but I want to start diving into the identity and branding. And I want to start with something simple, your podcast. You call it Let's Grab Coffee. And I think you started it way back at a young age. So we're going to talk about what brought you to Let's Grab Coffee. Tell us a bit more on your podcast.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's 7 a.m. in Chicago, so I definitely do have my coffee. In many ways, Ian, and thank you for that intro. It started back in 2016. I had just graduated university. I started my career at the Toronto Stock Exchange, otherwise known as TMX Group, which is the parent company. And they had just rolled out this associate program. A lot of people are familiar. These are, 2-year rotational programs. So you spend 6 months in a division or department. And, I was a new associate, super fresh. The first rotation I had was in a division called operations management. So long story short, I had a lot of time in operations management because I did a lot of my work. I figured out ways to automate the tasks, I was given. And so I had a lot of ample time on the side. And here I was one of, I think we were about 6 or 8 other associates. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how am I supposed to differentiate myself? Speaking of personal brand and building a presence, especially at a young age when I'm an associate, I literally just joined the workforce. How am I supposed to do this? And I found myself every time I would send someone an email, say, for example, you're a managing director, the subject line would always be, let's grab coffee. So that was the first part. I was like, okay, and maybe I'm onto something here.
Nice.
The other part of it was a lot of my friends, especially in the Lebanese community or the Arab community, they're either engineers, lawyers, or doctors, right? Very infamous. The three dragons of the career. And, I think for a lot of engineers, they don't have as much of the concept of networking and going to events and reaching out to people to grab coffee. At least for my friends, it was something very odd that I was doing. And so I'd come back every evening to my roommate and I would tell him about, I just met Elie, this amazing CEO. I met Samantha, this incredible C-suite executive. And here's what I learned. And he's like, George, I wish there was some way you can package this so we can listen to it. And so then I started thinking that, why don't I build a platform? And keep in mind, 8 years ago, podcasting wasn't even a thing. I mean, if I said the word podcast, people thought I was trying to be Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel, sort of like a talk show host. They didn't understand the concept of podcasting, kind of like it is now. So I created it. I started a very scrappy website. It wasn't anything great, no budget. And I just started reaching out to people cold. And in the beginning, nobody wanted to come on. People were like, I don't want to be the first guest on this weird show hosted by, a junior associate. And it just started building. fast forward 8 years, I've had almost 200 episodes. I've interviewed co-founders of Netflix, Starbucks, Reebok, David Stee, the music video producer of Drake, all sorts of different guests. And the thing I learned the most, Edie, and we're sort of talking about, and I know you're super intentional with your coaching, with your advisory, about kind of pausing before you act. It's always, I think, especially for my generation, I think we're too quick to want to
Mm-hmm.
produce. We want to execute. We want to move. We want to create something. I think the one lesson I learned, looking back 8 years, I think the best thing I did was just sort of sleep on it a little bit. I paused. I thought about why it is that I even want to create this podcast. And for me, it was, the big thing is I want to create a platform so selfishly I can get connected to the CEOs I want to learn from. I give them a platform to market their story, and I'm able to repurpose that content for other people to learn. And that's something I would do for the next 10 years, even if I wasn't paid for it. That's how I knew it was the right way to do it.
Very, very fascinating because, you actually use that excuse to sit down and listen and learn from people while creating the network. So that's a fantastic idea. I'm not sure how many will venture out and take the risk of starting their podcast. There's always that fear of rejection, which we're going to talk about. There is always that fear that, okay, what am I going to ask this gentleman or this lady or this person? I have no substance. I don't know the corporate world, because especially when you're young and leaving university or finishing university. I had a couple guests previously. One of them is my son, and the other person is Wissam Sabah. They fit that generation. My son is slightly younger.
Mm-hmm.
Wissam is about your age, very successful entrepreneur. And I asked the question of credibility, because typically, I mean, the senior people, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, they've got a lot of experience. So they have already credibility, and they're sitting on a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience, a lot of projects, a lot of stories to tell, and that's how their credibility was built. Obviously, at your age, there was no credibility. You have to earn it or find a way to put it out, especially for entrepreneurs. And if there are entrepreneurs listening, this is one of the most difficult one. Why people would entrust you with the money when you are starting at 22, 23, and you have a great idea, and you want a few $100,000. Why? So the question of why is also very important.
Mm-hmm.
So very interesting. But before we
Yeah.
move on, I just want you to tell me what's one coffee conversation early in your career that changed how you think about people, opportunity, or yourself. Can you share?
Yeah, it's a good question. And just to chime in real quick on what you were saying,
Hmm.
because I 100% agree, and I think even back then, to some extent, my viewpoint is still the same now, although it's a little bit easier to get guests. I'm assuming same for you. As you built your platform, right? It becomes easier, of course, with time, with consistency. But back then, I almost just saw it as a chance of probability, right? If I'm
Hmm.
going to reach out to Samantha, the CFO or the CEO, I have in my opinion, I had a 66% chance. Samantha was either going to say, yes, George, I'd love to get on the podcast. George, maybe. I'm not sure. Timing isn't a fit right now, but the door is open. Or it's a 33% chance I just get a no, which is not even bad,
Okay.
because at least Samantha replied, and now we have a connection, and who knows where the opportunities come. So for me, it was always a percentage of likelihood, right? And 66%
Uh-huh.
to me sounds quite high. So I think that's the first mindset. The second mindset, I just want to, especially as you're talking to, maybe your audience, they're thinking of doing something, and they want to start a business. The one thing I'd say is, especially for content, people love to talk about themselves,
True.
right? People love to share experiences. They love to pass on lessons they learned, especially to younger individuals. For whatever reason, selfishly, I think it makes us feel good, like we're passing something on. And so I kind of leveraged that from a psychological perspective. And I think people were actually very willing to share. What matters though is consistency. You're showing up in the right way, and you're delivering quality content that they can actually benefit from. So that's the one piece I just wanted to parlay on what you were saying. The one coffee conversation, it's really funny. I've had 200 of these, almost 200 of these coffee conversations, thousands of hours of recording, editing, prepping. One of the most important coffee conversation wasn't even a podcast. It was a real coffee with one of my mentors. He's a long time standing mentor of mine, now a good friend. And I actually had him on the podcast. He was number 100. It was sort of like a milestone, a full circle moment to be able to do this. He was an executive at TMX Group, very, very high ranking executive, very well known in the Canadian, business ecosystem. His name is Jean Degarnier. I remember the first time I met him, Elie. Again, he was, basically a CEO of a division at TMX Group, to put it simply. I was in this associate program. So, and we had known each other because he graduated from the same university. He gave a lot of time, energy, resources to the university. He invited me one day to his office. I'm Middle Eastern. We're both Lebanese. I think, I sort of have the picture of what that meeting would look like. In my opinion, back then, I'm 22 years old. I'm nervous as hell. And I knew Jean, right? But now it's different. We're formally working with each other, and he's very high ranking. I just started. He invites me over for lunch, and I'm expecting okay, this is a bit nerve wracking. I'm a bit stressed about this. And I get to his office, and he's like, "You want to go grab Subway?" And I'm like, sure. We're going to grab Subway. I'm thinking we're going to go have maybe a nice dinner. We grab Subway sandwiches. We come back to his office. He gives me a full hour of his time. And he basically taught me 3 things in that meeting, which to this day I use, and hence why I started the podcast. He said, build a large network and with people outside of your industry. First thing you should do today. And that compounds, right? Very much like investing. You start at 20 and 30, these relationships over time, they only compound. So build very, very good relationships, but also outside of your bubble. So if you're in finance, venture out, meet people in art, meet people in the sciences. He said, always bring value before you ask for anything. So in a meeting, before I come to you and I say, Elie, I want to be on your podcast, well, maybe I think of 2 to 3 guests that would be great for your podcast. And maybe as a result, over time, you're like, you know what? I like this George guy. There's something about him that that's sort of interesting. Let me pay him a favor. Right, so always bring value before you make the ask. And I think the third piece he always taught me was consistency always wins. Read more books and less news. So those 3 things to this day are just, they're not rocket science. People know them. But for me, they made a lasting impact.
Of course. I love it. I love it because it resonates with the crucial question I ask my guests. What does build relationship mean to you? How do you build relationship? Because the way people, and I've seen it around me, in social gathering, in conferences, in any type of medium where you encounter people carry those business cards and they go to the person and say, hello, I'm Elie Daher, and your name is, and you say, George Khalife. And I asked you, George, what do you do? And you tell me I work with TMX and I do this. And what goes on in my mind, George, is what? What do I get out of this person? Is he interesting? Do I benefit from him? Can I sell him anything? Can I use any of his, or I leverage him for anything? And if the answer is no in my mind, while we're laughing and smiling, I just say, oh, pleasure meeting you, and then I go somewhere else. And then I walk the room or walk the corridor or walk the conference. That's typically what I've seen around. So I ask my guests, and fascinating answers, of course, various answers everywhere. Last week, I had a lawyer gave me an excellent answer. His name is Karim Nassif. But if you listen to all the previous ones, Gostick, C.B. Bowman, Marshall Goldsmith, you name it. They all hover to what you said. Give value first before the ask. Think what goes on in my mind for George. Hey, George works here, he has a podcast. Maybe I can introduce him to 3 people. Maybe I can offer him an expansion. Maybe I can offer him an audit on his podcast since I'm a podcaster. I offer something before. That's what should go in my mind without asking. And George would probably take it, say thank you, and then reciprocate. And that's the beauty of networking. And I'd like our viewers and audience to really take this at heart and apply it, because you'll build deep connections, you'll build better relationships, long-lasting relationships, particularly if you are authentic, transparent, and do not falter on your promise or what you want to offer, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I mean, the authenticity part is super important. Eddie. I know, we kind of had this exchange when I first met you, and this is why we're here. I think we both resonate very well on this topic. I don't know if you've ever come across this, but the one saying for me that always hits true is you always want to feel, you always want to leave people feeling impressive versus making them feel impressed. And so the difference is, impressed means I'm trying to impress you, right?
Yes.
I'm putting on an act, and it's all about volume, and it's about me, and it's about putting this mask that I want you to see. It has nothing to do with you, right? Making you
Yes.
feel impressive is the opposite. I'm focused on you. I'm putting myself in your shoes. I'm seeing the world from your eyes and from your viewpoint, and I'm trying to basically merge the two worlds together, mine and yours. I'm trying to figure out if there's overlap. And sometimes there is an overlap, and that's okay. We don't have to be best friends. But if there is, I really genuinely think that's always the best approach. People want to feel good. They'll never, Maya Angelou quote, they don't care what you say or what you do. It's how you make people feel. That's ultimately what always wins.
Very nice. And that's what, to quote Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, that's exactly his sentence. Make sure that you leave people with how they feel. And that's the impression you want. Very good. So we're going to go to my 10-step process. Deciphering personal brand, I've broke it down into 3 phases. The first phase is knowing yourself, right? The mission, your ambition, and what makes you unique. Why you? Why people would need to listen to George? That's the uniqueness portion. And then from there, you activate what are the pillars of wisdom. And that's your first phase. Then 2, you just go, phase 2 is activation. Okay, the channels. Do I go digital? Where do I go digital? How the best to present my visibility? I've got credibility where I can build them. Now I'm going to make them visible. So we look at digital, we look at physical, conferences, papers, books, anything, and then build relationship to actually help consume this digital or physical. And that's really the phase 2. Now, phase 3 is sustainability and monetization. Okay, now how do I keep it? You said consistency. I need to be consistent, and I need to build for the long term. And I could monetize a little bit on it, by getting paid to speak or a conference or a training course or anything of that sort. So these are the 3 phases. The first one, let's talk about mission. So my belief, without a mission, really, branding is just noise. But in your world, I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, many millennials activate digitally before they even know why. So what's the mission behind what you have built? Let's move growth and opportunity on the side. But do you have a grandiose mission that you're putting forward in your head?
It's a really good question, to be honest. And I go back and forth on it. I think, I'll be very honest with you. I used to always have these grandiose ideas and larger missions. I think for now I'm trying to be the best professional I can be in the world that I'm executing on. Because I realized especially coming and having been born in Lebanon, growing up in the Middle East, my sort of path wasn't very. It's maybe not the most common, right? Like if you think about my career, I've been doing business development, market development for different firms, and I realized really quickly to what you're saying in terms of why you do what you do. I think for a lot of people in my generation, maybe the best way to think about it is, especially when you think about your brand and your purpose and your mission in life, when someone thinks of your name, say if I say Elie or George, what are the three things that come to my mind? Three words, right? So maybe for you, it's relationships, leadership, and let's say agility, just as an example. Hopefully that sums it up. For me, I thought really hard about this. It's connector. I've always loved connecting people. I've loved connecting people to money, to things, to ideas. It's always been in my DNA. I've always been and try to see myself as a trusted advisor in what I do. And the third most important for me is community building. It's what brings me the biggest joy, right? I love building ecosystems, and I try to bring that into everything I do, whether it's for work or personal. So hopefully, to answer your question, I think over time, what I want to try to do is, how do I start merging, now that I've built this platform, right? It's like what Denzel Washington says, first you learn, second you earn, and third you return. I hope that as I'm earning, whether it's relationships, resources, platforms, I want to figure out how I can return that, ideally in the Middle East. And maybe that's being a bridge between the North American platform I've built and what I know the Middle East lacks and needs, which is, a bit more capital, connection to ideas, and a bit of innovation. So we'll see. I don't know.
So the three things that people would know about you, or like come to mind, is actually I revealed it first time in a podcast with Barbara Singer, a great lady. I would recommend everybody to watch her episode. It's a fascinating episode. But I asked her, how do you define uniqueness in a person? Let's say I'm going to tell you what my uniqueness are. But uniqueness is not about only what you think about yourself, is what people think about you. And I told her, well, the simple exercise is that go to 10 of your closest workers or colleagues or co-workers or colleagues or trusted friends and advisors or coach and ask. I'll give you a minute. Think about the three top things that you can, that comes to mind when you think about me. So I am in a conversation with another person, and this person says, well, I really want something here, or I really want to talk to somebody who's here, or I want to introduce you to Elie, who's the three things, right? You said about yourself, conductor, and building community and so forth. So that's the first three things. And if you compare all the 10 people, which I did the exercise, and she wanted, even though I don't know her very well, I actually don't know her at all. We got acquainted together a couple times. She described, out of the three, she got two right that are common with all the other 10. Can you imagine?
So what were they?
I won't tell you. You have to watch.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell you. You have to watch Barbara Singer.
Let's go. I love it.
But it's fascinating. Now, the differentiation, the other
you're a good marketer, man. You're a good marketer. I like
Thank you. That's what they all say. I don't know why. The other two that described it differently, and I had to think about those people. I says, because I actually treat them differently, or I had different situations. So they saw a different side of me, not the actual recurrent one. So I love what you said. The three ideas that come to mind is absolutely great. Now let's talk about uniqueness. So my generation, we earn uniqueness through really depth and scars, particularly around the experiences that we get and the tough problems we solve and the areas of the struggle. But millennials, I think, or I don't know, you correct me again, they seem to engineer it differently today. And they look at differentiation very early. So they think uniqueness can be designed, not must be lived. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I first hear you say that, it's a tough position to answer, to be honest with you, because it's also hard for me to generalize, right? In the sense that I'm sure a lot of millennials, maybe have had scars that to them feel similar. Um, for example, like my parents went through much, much larger challenges than I did growing up, right? They faced much more hardships in
Mm,
Lebanon. But I think I absorbed some of their scars, and then seeing some pieces of the war, like in 2006, maybe are much smaller than what they saw, but it gave me an idea of some of that hardship that they had to live through, which then passes on a responsibility for me to make something even better with the opportunities that they were able to give me. I think that's the first part, is a bit of humility to know, look, this is my situation. These are the resources at my disposal. What can I do? Like, what's the most that I can do with what I've been given? I think is the first part. If you're in let's say my generation, or even younger, and let's say you don't have those physical scars, quote unquote, right? The hardships that maybe you've endured as well, Eddie. I think the one thing our generation can do better is what I call sort of manufactured hardship. Um, and that's not necessarily difficult to do. And what I mean by that is, starting a podcast is manufactured hardship. It is hard to do what you and I have been doing for several years. It takes a lot of time. It's not easy. You might have very little views. Sometimes it doesn't feel great. It takes a lot of your resources. So that's manufactured hardship. I know that I think you entered a cycling. Was it a cycling or marathon in your
uh,
TEDx?
and my TEDx, that was the marathon. No,
The
sorry,
marathon,
this is triathlon.
triathlon. That's
Triathlon.
manufactured hardship, right? For a lot of
Yes.
people, just exercise. I mean, getting outside of your comfort zone. I think all help, because what your generation had at your disposal is life was different, but also harder in some ways. For our generation, it's hard. It's just hard in a different way than it was for you, right? Access to social media, for example, is posing, as you know very well, much more hardship. They call it the anxious generation, right?
Mm.
We're living in this constant state of connectivity. We feel like we're connected to a million people, yet we're super lonely. Marriage rates are going down, birth rates are going down. There's definitely, you know, issues happening, I think, at a societal level. We just don't maybe see it or resonate in the same way. So I think for people struggling, I think that's one piece to take. I'll just say this, maybe if it's helpful. You see the paintings. I have four of them. I don't know if you can see all four, but um, I got them from Japan, and I visited Japan twice now. One of my favorite countries. And what I love about the Japanese, every country has pros and cons, but one of the very interesting things about the Japanese is they have this concept called wabi sabi. Maybe many of your listeners have come across it. And even though the Japanese are known for basically perfection, right? If you look at their railway system, if you look at their streets, they're super clean. They're very meticulous, right? Very process oriented. But the Japanese come up with this wabi sabi concept, which is the ideology about finding beauty within imperfection. And that applies to art. This was a street art. It was a guy in his
Mm.
70s or 80s who was basically retired. He was sitting in a cafe and he was painting them. And my wife and I come across him and we see him painting these, and we're like, that's so beautiful, right? And each one of these ladies represents a season, so summer, fall, autumn, winter. Um, and I think that's important for everybody listening, that hardships are going to happen, and I just think embracing life's imperfection and trying to navigate it with the best of your abilities is something we can all do.
Um, well, thank you for that. I'm learning a lot. I'm learning how to appreciate your generation too, because what you shared, actually, I never thought about it. Um, this the anxious society or the anxious mind with this constantly bombarded with social and connectivity, and you think you're connected to a million, but yet you're lonely. Um, thank you for that, and I'm sure our audience and viewers appreciate that very much. I love it.
Can I ask you a question actually on this topic?
Sure.
Let's maybe reverse engineer it. Um,
Depends.
what is one?
Depends how.
Yeah, yeah,
Depends
but
how critical it is.
with a disclaimer. I guess
Yeah.
for my generation, what's one thing about hardship, and maybe you have basically 3 decades on me, so I guess maybe just for my benefit, what are some things you've learned about life's hardships that you would pass down to millennials and below?
Um, I think you alluded a little bit. What we've seen is completely different than what you're seeing, particularly my generation. Um, move the war and all the hardship that you've seen during the war, how you survive. The survival has left a lot of scars, and then I pass it on, and I reflect always about the survival. I took my kids, I took the cousins, I took everybody, and I talk about it to learn or to just take some key takeaways of what wars can do, how survival can impact you. And it scarred me, but also it made me who I am. Taught me resilience at a very early stage. And I guess you watched my TEDx talk, and it's the summary of what's happening in the war and how I learned to be resilient.
Mm,
Now, putting resilient and resilience, adaptability, and grit at your workplace, and then give it back to your environment and your work environment is crucial, and it's gold, because especially what's happening now, we all have to adapt. We all have to be resilient through all the and ride all the waves of uncertainties in this world. So that's one of the key aspects. But the second one is also the structural society, or the upbringing. I struggled when my son, after graduation, and he was valedictorian in AI,
mm,
has graduated, and he got a dream job joining BCG as a consultant, 3 promotions in 2 years, and yet he left it all behind, and he wanted to go as an entrepreneur, and he has his own business now. After now, he's been in the business for 2 years.
wow.
I struggle with that decision. His mom was really against it, but we had a decision to make. And how do we stop Gen Z to pursue their own dreams, leaving a dream job and a hefty compensation package, and a
Mhm.
great career ahead. Thanks God, he's doing very well, and he's been voted Forbes 30 under 30 last week. So,
Oh wow.
uh,
Well,
yeah,
congrats to
I
him.
mean, and you know what his words were? See, Dad, see what happened. so, so this is some of the reflections. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. I appreciate those
Yeah.
insights.
All right, we're going to talk about personal brand versus personal substance,
Hmm.
because I'm going to be provocative here. Some millennials are better at showing work than doing work. So, where do you draw the line between visibility and credibility, George?
Yeah, I'd agree. To be honest, I think I see there's nothing that uh, again that this is transparency time, honesty time with Edie and
Hmm?
George, um,
Sure.
th- you
And the
know,
audience.
and the audience who's listening. Yes, I've seen it from a couple of my friends, and frankly, I was in that camp early in my career too, where we're sort of, and I was sort of trying to preach um, and share. I think a little bit ahead of my skis, if that makes sense.
Mm.
You know, I think we confuse when we think of impact. I think as a younger gen, what we're really trying to do is trying to be helpful. So it's coming from a good place. It's not like a malicious place. I think when your generation sees it, it's like, well, what does this guy know about XYZ? Or what has he done in XYZ, which I actually really appreciate. So I took
Mm.
that back and I said, you know what? How about we were heads down, for the next 5 years? Let's maniacally focus on actually achieving. Let's execute. Let's create some outcomes. Let's have measurable impact. And then we can rewind the tape, look back, you know, for the next like 5 or 8 years, and let's talk about some lessons learned. I think there's that camp. I just want to be careful because I've seen it on both ends, right? There's sort of two extremes. There's the person who works, is heads down, isn't highlight that doesn't highlight their story or their impact, fails to storytell, is not a good advocate for themselves. What that individual ends up, what happens to that individual is, unfortunately, they're exposed to less opportunity. I've seen it. I'm sure you have,
Mm.
and our
Mhm.
listeners. I've seen the
Mhm.
other extreme where it's talk, 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 bragging, bragging, highlighting, highlighting, and zero substance on the inside. There's also little opportunities eventually because that person, while they may seem great and they may be doing great today, it's very, very short lived, right? At some point, people are going to realize that there's no substance in this individual. So you kind of want to be somewhere in the middle,
Mm.
and my approach has always been tapered, like a gradual, like a step process. I execute a little bit, I'm highlighting. I execute, I highlight. I execute. And that goes for internally at my firm, where I'm able to advocate for myself, but on the backing of what I've been doing. Ideally, you have other people do that. So hopefully I have either a manager or a colleague like an AE who says that George guy has done an excellent job at hosting this event, or he did a great job in presenting in this meeting. So you want to have advocates around you, but you can only have advocates if people actually know who you are. And I'll just end by saying all of this is important, but consistency and credibility and your reputation are really what matter. But you also want to leverage LinkedIn, you want to leverage Instagram, whatever social media to your advantage. If you don't do that, who else is going to know about George Khalife or Elie Daher, about their careers, what they've been doing? It's very difficult if you're doing it in isolation. So I'm much more of in between, and ideally walk before you run, you know.
Mm.
What do you think about that, Elie?
No,
Any
I
pushback on?
like the no, I like the way you put it. You earn it and then you put it out. You earn it and you put it out, and you just climb the ladder till you reach the platform. I think that's a proper way to do it. Amplify your gain credibility step at a time. Um, that's fine with that. I'm thinking digital tools really gives you or your generation an unfair leverage
Hmm.
over us.
It's true.
I know some of our coaches even, and I manage a coaching organization, are struggling with the digital environment too. They don't
Hmm.
leverage it. They probably leverage 5% of it. And even your generation, with all the knowledge you have, you're only leveraging 15-20%. The rest is there's so much tools, so many uh, shortcuts to make and to take and to use to your advantage.
Hmm.
But it still gives you an unfair leverage, but a dangerous shortcuts. So if it is used well, it really compresses time and give you great output. But if it uses poorly, it inflates ego. And so while my generation waited too long, I think your generation has sometimes moved too fast. And I guess you have answered a little bit this question, but I'm gonna ask you that again. How do you decide when to activate digitally and when to stay quiet? And you said, I'm gonna do it in ladder approach, right? Is this what
Yeah.
could be your answer?
I think that's part of it. The other part is, you're right that we have an unfair advantage. It's very true. The reality is, the future generations like Gen Alpha and Beta, and I don't know what's coming next, but
Mm.
all the future generations, they're going to look at us and say the same thing 30 years from now. I might be on the podcast, and you know, Nicole might look at me and say, "George, you have you know, we have an unfair advantage because we have ChatGPT and whatever else is about to come.
Yeah.
So I think the important part is, which credit to you and kudos to you for, yes, being, let's say, in the baby boomer bracket, but you've done such a great job at, you know, staying agile and being malleable as the technology grows, because that's the most important part. Being curious and always be willing to learn. This like open mindset, very hard to do. It's easy to say, everybody talks about it, but for you right now to be using Riverside, the same platform I use as a millennial, you know, recording a podcast, using LinkedIn incredibly well, you've written a book, like that's what you have to do to sort of, you know, be the fish that rides the wave versus the fish that gets caught in the wave. I think for my generation, the hard part is, frankly, there's a lot of distractions. Yes, we have access. How many people listening to this right now, hands up, if you just go on your phone, you look at the percentage of your battery and look at how much time is spent on each app. Just be very honest with you. Look at them. And then if, let's say, Instagram is at the top, be very honest with yourself. How productive has your time on Instagram been? Number one. Number two, how much of your time is you contributing meaningfully, or you digesting meaningfully, or is it just you mindlessly doing this? You know, and we've all been there. I've been there all the time, right? By the way, these apps are engineered to suck your time and to mindlessly get you to stay on it as long as possible. So to wrap this summary, be very careful about the social media you're using, self-audit once in a while, and be very honest about which apps are being productive and which ones aren't. And if, let's say, LinkedIn is a source of productivity, then share more there. Spend less time on Twitter or TikTok or YouTube, but find the ones that give you access to opportunity. Because I'll just say this, Elie, I know you know this very well. I didn't say this in the beginning, but one of the other pieces of advice that Jean gave me, this wasn't really advice, but it's, you know, when someone tells you something, it's indirect. You don't, it's not directly advice, but it's, you mentioned something and I'm like, oh my God, he's onto something. Jean back then told me that he never ever used a resume to apply for a job.
Interesting.
And, you know, 10 years ago, I thought that was crazy. I'm like, how is that even possible? And I now come to realize it's because when you execute, you build relationships and you leverage platforms like LinkedIn so you're visible in the right way, people will give you access to opportunities without you even having to apply to them. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the crux of personal branding. Excellent and well said. Um, that's where it is. If you're clear in your mission, if you're clear in your uniqueness and you talk about it and you position your pillars and you claim your credibility and you show, don't tell, or do both, tell and show, I think people would, will identify you and I will offer you opportunities. Absolutely. That's one of the secret recipes, right?
how has it
Um,
helped you, by the way? You know,
um,
and I don't know, how long have you been active on LinkedIn? I guess,
okay,
do you struggle with this, like the social? Yeah, I'm just kind of curious from your perspective.
sure, sure. So I don't know if I didn't share how the actual personal branding book and platform came in, and how did this podcast come to light. The whole book on personal branding came out of frustration. And my frustration at 60, 61, I wanted to build my brand. I have a lot to give, a lot of knowledge accumulated over the years, 30 some years of business and career, being in 12 different countries, living in 12 different countries, 4 continents, 7 divisions of, 3 different industries, um, a lot of cultures that I crossed, a lot of
Mm.
negotiations across borders. I've learned a lot and I give back. People say that I'm a good coach. So every time I touch people, I touch and I help, and they see the impact and they appreciate that. So I said, okay, well, I want to build that personal brand and I want to be not only credible, but visible. So
Mm.
I went out to the market and I started asking, what do I need to do? So some people tell me go to a PR company. So you go to the PR company and they tell you, okay, well, we can put an article here, that's $5,000. We can put you on a speaking platform, that's 15,000. We can put you on a magazine, and that's 25,000. So plus our fees, of course.
Mm.
So I
Yes.
said,
In
no,
addition.
this is not what I wanted. Then I said, okay, what do I need? I looked at the digital platforms and I said, okay, whether people put you on LinkedIn and then amplify likes and connections, and I thought this was the game. So let me connect with some of the experts. Some have 300,000 and they have a course for a living, or they do it for you, or you do it yourself. So I tried it and tested it with a company out in Europe, and I fired them the next month because they do the strategy and they give you to very young age people, not experienced. They don't know what my brand and what my uniqueness is. And I had
Mm.
to correct everything because they didn't live the world of a CEO or the corporate life to relate to the pains and to relate to my input. So either you go here and it's all young and they're not experienced in the careers and in the corporate world, or you go to the PR and just PR, putting fluff out, frankly. So I decided, okay, well, I paid already a lot of money. I think I'm going to do it myself. So I did the research. It took me 6 months to research how to build a personal brand for a fellow senior executive, knowing my pains that resonates with their pain. And I put that 10-step process and I documented it for people to read it so they can apply it. I put an online course so people can do it themselves with a big, thick workbook, or they can come to me for help and I coach them through it. And that's the personal branding. That's what I see. It's a long winded answer to your question, but
Mm.
that's how I came across to build that. Now, going to LinkedIn itself, and to your generation, your generation preaches connections. They want more connection on LinkedIn, more Instagram followers. I know my kids are just crazy about Instagram, and they get more followers, or
Mm.
TikTok influencers. This is for us is meaningless. The connections that you have on LinkedIn are meaningless unless you are fostering that relationship. You have a deep relationship with them. Your likes, um, it depends on the quality of the post that you put. And I'm going to give you and give the audience and the viewers a math problem to solve.
Mm.
So you have a person that has 300,000 followers, okay? And he posts or she posts one post and gets 1,000 likes, 300 comments. And I have, let's say, another person has 5,000 connections or followers and does one post and gets 70 likes and um, 30 comments or 40 comments. Who do you think has more engagement?
Of course, the latter.
Of course. And that's really the
Mm.
math. And if you understand that, that is really where it is. So stop chasing followers. Some followers are just there because they want to do the same. They want to accumulate followers and make that avalanche of followers. But unless you have that connection that is meaningful, you don't need them to be following you. Now,
Mm.
push it forward. And that's one gentleman on a podcast that actually told me this, and I still resonate to that. And he told me, well, imagine you have 5,000 followers. How many followers really you need for your business? If you convert, I cannot handle more than 70 customers,
Mhm.
right? So if I can convert 100 customers out of my followers, I don't, how many followers you need? 500 to convert them to 100 to to really, if they're meaningful connections, that's all you need, and it's filled up your day in connections in really business in real business. So work backwards and then think of your LinkedIn strategy or Instagram strategy or whatever, and stop chasing, uh, those clicks. And that's my 2 cents worth after a long way and learn it. People still have to post meaningful content. Is king. Content has to resonate to the people, but it has to also link to your uniqueness. Just don't post on the weather, right? Don't post on something you don't understand. It is cliche. Be authentic, be transparent, explain your point of view, explain your knowledge, and pass it on for people that want to consume it and learn from it. And that's my advice.
I like it. I think that's 100%. I mean, I resonate with everything you're saying, and there's different comfort levels. Like, I'm sure you come across people who hear that and say, I understand. I can't. I sort of cringe every time I think I have to post on LinkedIn. I find it so cheesy. I don't like it. So there's that camp. And for that camp, I would say it's completely up to you. We're not forcing you. I mean, the platform is there. And frankly, I think the stat is, 1 to 5% of all of LinkedIn's users are actually active. Think about that for a second. I forget the accurate stat, but it's something very, very low. So, 1 to 5%, that means that from all of the people that have accounts on LinkedIn, a very, very, very small number are the ones actually posting, which means from a business development standpoint, marketing, there's a ton of opportunities for you to create and to sort of get into that camp. And there's different ways, right? Some people share posts, some people share videos. You can also, frankly, just like other people's posts, repost, comment, right? Maybe direct message individuals. Like there's different mediums that you can go about it. You don't necessarily have to do the same cookie cutter approach that everybody does. But it's certainly, I think, a waste to have platforms like this today and not have them. I'd also probably say not to overthink a lot of your content, right? Yes, chasing likes and comments is not the right approach. But ultimately, I think what people get caught up with is overanalyzing, right? They stress too much about, is this a perfect post? Am I saying the right things? What if someone reads this and disagrees or doesn't like it? Or what if my manager sees this and what are they going to think?
Yeah.
If you do that, you're never going to, make progress in building your personal brand and your voice. So share. You can sort of evolve as you go. Things will adapt. It's not that serious. Your LinkedIn post, in the grand scheme of this earth, it's really not that important or serious. So.
Well said. Well said. Well said. So here we go. We have the two opinions, and they converge at some place. So perfect. I'm gonna move to the last question: legacy versus momentum. And this is really very important because momentum is easy to celebrate. I reached, YouTube last week gave me a nice award, a silver award, 100,000 subscribers in 7 months. Perfect. Nice. Celebrate. But legacy is really hard to measure. So I'm not sure I'm leaving a legacy after this, with the podcast and, whatever effort I'm doing to keep with me and behind me. So at your age, and you're in the 30th, how do you, what do you want to say something?
Say yeah, 32.
I'm just waiting for that.
I'm like, I look 52, but I'm
see if he's gonna say his age, because I was gonna say it at 32, and then I paused. I said maybe he doesn't want to give it out. So good. So at 32, how do you make sure you're not visible? You're not just visible, but meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, it's really just about perspective, Elie. I try to, right? It's helped me a lot with just mental health and I guess living seriously but not taking life seriously, if that makes sense. Because that balance is hard. I think if you're too serious all the time, at some point you risk burnout. Certain things happen. I remember my father and my father-in-law both gave me really good advice, which is, kind of if you ever see a stock chart,
Mm,
sometimes if you look at like the week, there's like huge
mm,
movements, right? But if you
mhm.
if you click max on that stock chart, all you see is this, right?
Yeah.
It looks like a linear progression, but you're not seeing like the massive swings in between. And
Hmm.
so their advice to me was, George, what's important is when you zoom back in life, when I'm 60, 70, 80, 90, it's important to see the linear progression up, even though in the weeks or days, maybe it's going to look very volatile, right? It might be like a roller coaster ride. Um, so I think that's the first piece. I'm trying to live my life in a linear progression. I'm going to have massive swings up and down in the short term. But I think over time, what I'm trying to do is this. Um, the other kind of perspective I always give myself is, on average, people have about 4,000 weeks in this world. That's about roughly 80 years, 4,000 weeks. It's not that many summers. It's not that many Christmases. It's not that many winters. And so I just tell myself that because I think in my generation, it's very easy to get stressed, anxious, to put ourselves out, to do great work, and to live a meaningful life. And to that, I say, we're all on this floating rock and we only got one shot. And so if there's one thing I'm going to hopefully do is share as much as I can in the interim, be a good person, and most importantly, love my family and do good work. Basically it.
I love it. I love it, George. Lot to learn from you.
Likewise, good sir. Thank you for giving me a
Very
platform.
nice. Very nice. George, this conversation really proved something very important, that your generation is not wrong. It's early. My generation is not obsolete. It's deep.
Mm.
And the future really belongs to the leaders who can combine your speed with our scars, your leverage with our judgment, and your visibility with real substance. So I guess that's what it means to truly reimagine you. And I want to thank you for this thoughtful and grounded conversation. And what stood
Thank
out
you,
is
Edie.
this: you don't chase visibility, you earn credibility. And in a world that we are obsessed with the speed, your story reminds us that trust, relationships, and clarity still matters. To our listeners, your personal brand is not your job title, your age, or even your follower counts. It is how consistently you show up, how intentionally you build relationships, and how clearly you stand for something. If today's conversation resonated, ask yourself one question: what credibility am I building before I ask to be seen? Until next time, keep reimagining you. Thank you.
Thank you, Edie.